graveyard, I suppose the whole story of this process started following settlement in Western Australia. And what was happening is that ships were coming into the port. Some of them were being wrecked, some of them were not capable of carrying on their journeys or voyages, and they were being abandoned on the beaches. And this actually, I suspect, caused a rather sort of, it didn't look terribly good to the settlers to settle these abandoned wrecks lying all over the place. And eventually the government decided that it had to be managed properly, as governments tend to want to do. And so they designated an area, or they initially designated a place down in Cockburn Sound to get rid of ships, but this started to become another problem. And so they said the best bet is we're going to get them to be dumped in what they call the deep water graveyard, which is about 10-15 kilometres southwest of the west end of Rottnest, in about 100 metres of water. So over various periods of time, ships that were being used in the harbour, a ship would come in, it would not be fit to carry on its voyage because it was in such bad condition. It would be, say, damaged in a storm or something like this. So generally those ships then became lighters, or they became hulks, and they stored coal or supplies for the ship's water, that sort of thing. And they were tied up in the harbour and serviced the ships that were coming in. And then eventually they became so hopelessly rotten that they became a danger to the port, and at that point they were taken out and sunk in the deep water graveyard. And we've got probably records of about 50 or 60 ships from around 1900 to the 1950s that were sunk in the graveyard. And then what happened is Mike McCarthy we started to get reports from fishermen who were sort of fishing out in this area, and shipwrecks are big fish aggregation areas. Fish tend to collect around them, and if you go over the top of a wreck site with an echo sounder, you'll see a big column of fish, basically. So fishermen love them, and so they started to report sites, and they were way too deep for us to sort of deal with. And but we started to gather this sort of information together, and then about 10 years ago, a local film company, Prospero Productions, they were doing the shipwreck detectives, and one of the projects, they came to us and said, what sort of projects would you like to do that you're not normally funded for by the government? And one of them was the Deepwater Graveyard. And unfortunately that program never went to air, like 6 other programs did, but the story wasn't good enough. But it was fascinating. It has been fascinating because they commissioned a local aerial survey company to run an aerial magnetometer survey over a section of the Deepwater Graveyard, and we came up with 6 or 7 very large magnetic anomalies. So we then knew the precise position of 5 or 6 big iron wrecks that had been sunk in the graveyard. And fortunately at that time there was a group of technical divers. These are people who dive on gas mixtures. And they were looking for things to do. You could go dive, to 100 metres and have a look at a few anemones on the bottom, but it's pretty boring stuff. And so they were really excited about this idea. We gave them positions of the sites, and they dived on them, and they reported there were wrecks there. They got very fuzzy photographs in the beginning, because we were just learning how to do things. And it really became really interesting. And I've been working in Turkey in 2001, and we'd been using a 2-man submarine to go and look for wreck sites. And it's a very sort of, it's a one atmosphere thing, so it's quite sort of comfortable, and think of a big plexiglass bubble. And I was in this in the Swan River sailing my boat, and I looked across at the Pier 21, and there was a boat with one of these submarines on the back of it. And I said, God, this is, who's that? So we did some investigation and found the guy who owned it. And he was also looking for things to do, because you can go down with a submarine to 100 metres of water and have a look around at a very boring bottom. And we gave him the positions of some of the wreck sites, and he started to dive on them. And we started to get high definition video footage of the sites. And we've now identified probably about 16 sites. Well, we've located 16 sites. We've identified about 5 of them. We've actually got names for them. And virtually every day, well, not every day, but once a month or so, new information is coming in about this sort of whole area. So it's very interesting. I dived in the submarine one time. We were in 70 metres of water, and you could see the surface. And we were down for 2 hours, I think it was. And of course, the technical divers can only dive for about 15 minutes, and then they have to spend about 3 hours decompressing in 10 metres of water. So it's a wonderful tool, and I think gradually as time goes on, we're going to learn a lot more about the graveyard and the ships that have been sunk there.